Welcome back to session 5 of Financial Fitness here at FBC. A couple things I wanted to cover from last week or clarify, and we'll probably cover a couple of these things tonight anyway. So the first one is I had talked about HSAs and 529s. We'll get to those later, so I won't clarify here, I guess. Next was the opportunity of cost of college. I was talking about the college decision last time, and I was talking about, how do we go to college? How do we do it? And one of the factors that I failed to point out that we need to keep in mind at all times is the opportunity cost of our time while we're there. And what I mean by that is if you're going to college and you're a student full time, then what you have to do is you have to weigh that full time, all those hours that you'll take doing that, with the time that you would have otherwise spent working full-time or doing some other career path. A lot of times, obviously you'll find that the high school diploma won't get you paid as high as a trade school or college diploma will. So you have to weigh what would, working a bunch of overtime at your local factory have gotten you or things like that. So the actual cost to go to college every year is the income you would have made otherwise too. And so we have to keep that in mind. And the main way that plays out, there's two things. One is the strength of degree that you get and the income potential of that degree afterwards. If it's not way better than an alternative, then it may not have been the ideal use of your time. Or if we're going to take 7, 8, 9 years to do a bachelor's degree, then it might have been better to have done that a little quicker, maybe even on a little bit of debt. So again, we don't want to rack up crazy amounts of debt in college. That's not the recommended way. But if we're working our way through college, that's usually a good way to do it. It's just keep an eye on how long it's taking you. So if it's taking you more than an extra year or so, you should sit down and go over some numbers and just make sure that everything in your decision is worth it. So always be analyzing that. It's really important. And when we're making these big decisions, we do want to think through some of those things. And then I also mentioned last time something that was blatantly wrong. We were talking about the ideal happiness. And I asked the crowd, I said, well, what amount does the person have to make or a household have to make to be considered ideally happy? After that, studies show that it's either a diminishing return or people just aren't happier the wealthier they get after a point. And I had said it was around $250 for a household. I was a little off, quite a bit off. It's actually $65 to $95K, and I think I was thinking 2 adults, so I'm thinking $120 to $180. It's probably closer to the real number for 2 incomes. If you're going off the median income, which is around $62 or $63K a year in America. So anyway, it's actually $65 to $95K, which is really interesting and really neat, because the average American family, or I'll say the median American family, is making that. So we, as a society, should be happier and even more content, probably, than we are. And our basic needs are definitely met at that threshold. That's part of what goes into that psychology. For all you psych nerds out there, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, those are usually met. So anything above certain thresholds starts getting into a diminishing return on your happiness production. So, all right, we'll move into investing tonight. Investing is the offensive measure that we're going to use in our attack plan, in our battle plan. What we do is we want to put away as much as we want, and we want it to as much as we can, and we want it to compound and grow for us in a really good and powerful way. And we've been harping on this in session 1. Compound interest is extremely powerful, and we want to use it to our advantage. So the average income in America right now is cited as $48,000 a year. Who here remembers what I said for the amount per month in our budget that we should try to have towards investing? Anybody remember those percentage tables from session 1 or 2? 15, and I heard a 10. So yeah, 15 is what we ideally want to shoot for. Sometimes we have to do a little less, and that's okay, especially while we're paying down debt and things. But we want to try to get our budget freed up so that we can do that. you guys are going to see how the numbers work out. Okay, $48K a year. Let's just take that number as a nice average number. Let's say that that's what my household makes. That means if I can put away 15%, that is $7,200 per year. Now I know that's 48, remember we're talking 48K, that's probably pre-tax, so I'm cheating a little. Let's just pretend that 48's our net, okay? So cheating a little bit. $7,200 invested per year. If I can just earn 10% on that money per year, and I do that for 40 years, so from when I'm 20 till when I'm 40, or 60, sorry. What do you guys think that'll be worth in my account? Anyone want to guess? Scott, how much do you think? $7,200 a year times 40 years, just growing and compounding. What do you think? Throw me a ballpark. 600,000. Anyone else want to guess? Anything? Evan, what do you think? 1.3 million. Okay, all decent guesses. $3.3 million. Okay? If you just are doing 15% of the average American income. Net. So I'm cheating a little. What about if we were only to get 7%? That's still $1.5 million, really close to Evan's guess. So if we get one of the safest rates of return and we do just the 15% over our whole career and start that day one when we start a job, for all you guys who are college or high schoolers out there, the day you start your job, if you can allocate 15% and not be in crazy debt and never change that, you're going to be set. Now imagine just two people doing that, right? Because we're doubling up, so if we're married. So another thing is, all those numbers, guys, I didn't assume you ever got a raise in that 40 years. That's just the base amount every year, going in and compounding. So let's look at America today. The average retirement savings right now is under $250,000 total. That's what people have in their nest egg from their entire career of working, age 56 to 61. After age 61, people tend to, and we'll talk about that a little bit in our retirement plan, people will tend to not be growing their wealth as much post 60. Usually when we're working and contributing is when we're the riskiest, when we're growing our money the most. And then when we, if we're doing it right, frankly, we probably lower our risk profile a bit as we get older. The average retirement savings is under $33,000 for people aged 32 to 37. Okay, think about when you leave college. Most people are 21, 22 years old. 10 years to 15 years after college, the average people have is $33,000. If they didn't compound their money at all, that means they're only saving $3,000 a year on average or less without compounding at all. So that tells you that they're saving even less because that money should be growing. About half of everyone in that age range has under $1,000 invested in retirement. Under $1,000. 32 to 37. These are when we're starting to really get in, settled in our career, maybe getting a middle management type of thing. You know, we've definitely been working somewhere for a while. $1,000 for half. That's crazy. So we need to be serious about saving, guys. We need to be really serious about being disciplined and putting that money away and then never touching it. So 70% of Americans actually don't have a plan at all laid out for retirement. And anyway, and I talked about this as, and 29% of all Americans, not just in that range, 29% of all Americans don't have more than $1,000. So that's about a third, 1 in 3, don't have any retirement in America. So what do we do to start? Well, a really good piece of advice is we want to pray like everything depends on God, but we want to work like everything depends on us, all right? So we want to do exactly that. Give it all over to God, but we need to be working as hard as we can as if he had nothing to do with it, and it's everything to do with our discipline and our spearheading the effort. So how do we get to where we can save $600 a month or so, which is what that $7,200 divided by 12 is for anyone who's not super mathy. So how do we get to where we save the $600 a month? Well, we learn how to budget. We learn how to get out of debt so we don't have a lot of debt sapping our budget. We get an emergency fund so that we can absorb those things. And we start saving for college, housing, things like that we want to do. And then we start really getting into major retirement savings. We need to focus, so we need to learn how to invest. We need to, that's part of why we're here. So in order to prosper, we do have to learn and get better. We have to be book smart about some of this stuff. We need to know what seeds to plant and what fertilizers to use. We're not just out there blind throwing seeds, okay? We talked about being defensive last time. That's insurance. But investing, this is our offense, this is our sword, this is what we do leading the cutting edge here. So financial management becomes a mission for us, and we get to the point, ideally, what's our end goal, really? Is just to Scrooge McDuck and dive into our vault of gold coins and dollars? No, it's so that we can have a really good peace of mind, we can have a good life, we can take care of our family and those that we care about, and we can give to the community and to the church and others to help them as well and love on our neighbors. So the other thing, promotions, and I've said this before, this is really, really, really key, especially for you younger guys, but for everybody, this is really important. Promotions can mean more offense rather than a higher standard of living. I talked about this with the guy who went out, he got a promotion, got a little raise, $3, bought a car, ended up getting himself a pay cut because of that decision. We don't want to do that. That's increasing your quality of life or increasing your standard of living. We don't always need to do that. When we get a raise, a lot of times that extra money goes into something else, okay? And I might talk about this, or you guys can ask me after class. This is something that I preach, or I practice what I preach. I got a promotion within the last year, and the first thing I did is I sat down, I looked at some numbers, and I ran the analysis on, is it better for me to put into a pre-tax 401, or is it better to do post-tax, pay down a house debt with that money? And which is growing better, what's the risk, all that, okay? So this stuff's really important, but my quality of life did not go up at all, not even a little, when I got a promotion. So my budget stayed exactly the same. That's really important. All right. So basic rules of investing. Well, we've got the KISS rule, which means keep it simple, stupid, okay? We don't need to be day trading. We don't need to be shorting stocks. We don't need to become financial gurus to be really, really good at investing or to grow our money, okay? As I mentioned before, there's 3 good ways to build wealth in America, but one of them is a little bit every month over a long period of time, let it compound, and that's what we're shooting for in most cases, okay? So we want to keep it simple. So we don't need to do a whole lot with day trading. So we want to diversify. You guys probably heard the little adage about all your eggs in a basket, right? We don't want everything in one basket because if that basket falls, all the eggs break and now we're out of luck. We don't want to be there. We don't want to get into that position or that predicament. So we need to diversify our funds and we need to understand how to do that, why we're doing that, and where we're doing that in our priority for investing and in the funds that we're choosing, okay? Someone asked me last year, and this is a really good point, so I'll bring it up, about stock options through your company, okay? If I get hired and they give me a bunch of stock options, awesome, great. I'll take those and I'll sit on them, and I might even sit on them long term and ride them out. When I retire, cash them in. Or if I see a peak, maybe I'll cash them in. What I don't do is put every single ounce of my investing money into my company. First off, it breaks the first rule that I just mentioned, which was diversifying and keeping it simple. I guess that's simple, actually, but it would be stupid. So it breaks the second rule, which is diversifying. So we don't want to put all of that money into one company, because then what happens if our company goes out of business? Well, we lose all of our stock. We lose all our money in the stock market, all of our investment, our 401, and guess what? We don't have a job. So we get kind of a double whammy there. So stock options for your company, fine, take advantage of some. but balance it in your portfolio. It should not be everything, okay? Ecclesiastes 11:12 says, invest in 7 ventures, yes, in 8. You do not know what disaster may come upon the land. So diversifying is biblical. This is an idea. We need to spread it around a bit. Okay. There's a reason, too, that I mentioned the 15% rule in your budget. This is a really good target mathematically. What it'll generally do is you'll retire with dignity, you'll have a little more, and actually if you do the 15% rule, your standard of living will probably actually be slightly higher. It's a statistic I didn't mention. I don't want to misquote it, so I'll just say it's really high, the number of Americans that when they retire, they end up retiring with lower income or lower standard of living than when they were working. Okay? So if we can help it, we don't want to be in that group. We want to be better than that. Okay? So the way we work for that is that 15% rule is, again, really good target for that. So the other thing is we never, ever touch our retirement investing before we are retirement age. What's retirement age, everybody? 59 and a half, according to the U.S. government. For okay. Good question. Okay, so the question is, wait, doesn't retirement age differ based on your situation and everything? Yes, it does. In her case, she was saying her mom can't retire till she's about 65. Well, if we're trying to optimize our Social Security, then 65 to 70 is a whole lot better than 60, okay? And some of the stuff, Scott, young guy, should we rely on Social Security? Do you think you'll have it? No, good answer. Prepare as if it will not be there. Pretend it won't. It might, but it's an added blessing if it is, and if it's not, you're ready, okay? So the answer is that as far as the laws go for when we can touch our 401s, they're all around that same age, around 60, okay? However, different companies have different pension plans. Some of them have different medical benefits and other things that you can get through the company, and those often are based on time and service and sometimes age. So companies will try to keep you around longer to give you the better incentives, but the government as a whole, if we really want to get to our retirement invested funds, like our 401s and our Roths, around 60. Okay? Okay. So we do not touch our money until we are retirement age, which is 60 plus. If you touch the money before that, it's huge penalties. Assume about half of it will be gone instantly from penalties and fees, because that's about right. It's like 35 to 40% usually, but just pretend it'll be half. I have horror stories of people doing this. Every single person I know that took it early ended up spending it, and now they don't have anything in their retirement, and they're in a worse position financially than if they would have just left it alone and figured something else out for the money that they took. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about the Roth IRA. And the Roth is, in my opinion, this is one of the greatest things since the Wheeler sliced bread. Anybody who knows me and who talks finance with me for even 5 minutes, I'll use the word Roth like really quickly. It's such a great way to save. And there are so many great ways. It's so good. And the reason it's so good is we get to put all of our money over our whole life, our $600 a month. If we do it post-tax and we put that all into an account and let it compound and grow out of control, that $3.5 million or so that I mentioned is now all ours tax-free. I could go the day I turn 59 and a half to my Roth account, pull out $3.3 million from the account, if that's what I had in it, and the government could not touch 1 single cent of that money. No penalties, no taxes, all of that. It's my money. That's insane. That's an insane deal. In a society where the government taxes us 3, 4, 5 times on every single dollar we make, that's a really good way to do it. Not only that, well, now because I'm not bloating my income from my 401 payments, the government, from a traditional 401, because the government does tax Social Security as income. So my point is my income when I'm retired, if a majority of my wealth is in a Roth, will look very, very low, and I'll actually look very poor to the government on tax day, even if I have $3 million sitting in my account. So there's other benefits to the Roth. Okay. There's two types. Generally, we've got traditional 401s and Roth 401s. Those will have the traditional 401 limits, which I believe are around $19,000 a year, and then and that usually comes out from your paycheck or company directly. You can set it up. A lot of self-employed people will use those, and some businesses will offer them. Again, just remember, all the money going into a Roth is always after tax, not before. One sec. And then the other one is the regular Roth IRA, which is a $6,000 contribution limit, and it has an earned income rule to it, except for a spouse. You can actually double dip with a spouse. Question?
So I have been working for the state in some capacity for the last 6-7 years.
Yep.
I have a retirement CRE, which is technically also a pension.
Mm-hmm.
And if I move, all of that money is going to be sitting there. I'm no longer eligible for pensions. I'm no longer working for the state.
Yep.
Would you suggest pulling that money and putting it into, say, like a Roth 401k or a Roth IRA versus letting it sit in the ERB?
Okay, that's a good question. So she has a specialized retirement through the state. For military guys, this is called a TSP, or government workers, it's called a TSP, thrift savings plan. Hers is called an ERB. They're all horses of the same color, really. She has money there. If she were to leave, what would she do with that? Well, it has a pension attached to it. Obviously, you won't get the pension. Think of that as it's probably a different fund. Police officers are the only ones I know that their 401 is sometimes just their pension, and it's kind of a weird, or they pay a special pension fee and no retirement. Police officers do a little bit weird because they're just set up differently. Anyway, off topic. The question is, do I roll that over? Well, the actual verbiage was, do I pull it out? No, we never, ever pull our money out early because we get taxed on it. When it touches my bank account, I get taxed on it. We do roll it over. And if you go from a traditional, which is what this probably is, to a Roth, you will get taxed on it as income that year that you roll it over. So if your income that year is actually really low, I think that's a good time to do it. If your income's really high and you're going to get taxed on it and you're young, you're probably still better off doing it. If you're older, probably not worth it. The juice isn't worth the squeeze if you're like, let's say 50, because just let it sit 10 years and grow, and then we're going to 4% rule it at 60, and we'll just, we'll do our investments and we'll set them up from this moment on a little better, but it may not be worth it financially to take the hit if you're older. So for someone young, probably. The answer with all these is you do have to run the numbers. You do have to see what it's going to cost you to do, and we do that with ROI, opportunity cost. So you want to look at what you're giving up and what you're getting for it. So you have to sit down and run some numbers. Okay, I was going to ask you guys with the Roth IRA, with the Roth IRA, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you think the government loves that? Not a whole lot, because they're not taxing people, and a lot of people don't take advantage of this, right? I told you all the American stats. If every single American were utilizing Roths, this probably would go away, my opinion. But the government absolutely doesn't love it. So just know that this could go away at any time. So I'm not trying to say, jump on the train today, but you might jump on the train today because, you never know. And you'll be grandfathered with whatever you have in it, probably. So, all right, I think that's good for that slide. So we've got other forms of retirement account. These are the more traditional. So I got a question about some of these. 401 is called, 401k is the most common. Anytime I'm talking about a traditional or 401, this is what we're talking about. Don't get too confused or hung up with it. Just know that it's pre-tax money. We call this a tax favorable plan. And I'm not sure why they don't call the Roth the tax favorable plan, right? But it's about when is it tax favorable, right? This one's tax favorable today, right now, ready to go. Off my paycheck every month, if I put into a 401k, that money comes directly off my taxable income. So I don't get taxed on it today. And remember, I told you that it's an insanely high, I'm going to say 95% plus. I'm probably misquoting. Of Americans, though, that don't retire earning more than they did when they were working. Well, if that's true, then a traditional plan is really good because you can start pulling out that income every month from your retirement account and be taxed on it at a lower rate than what you'd get taxed on it today. So that's the theory behind this. You're kind of deferring, you're playing some tax games. There usually is a sweet spot depending on your income. If you're middle or middle upper class, then these games can matter a little more. Obviously, if you're upper class, like really wealthy, then this stuff matters a ton. So you need to really be, you'll have an accountant working that. So anyway, that's the theory. And the limit for that is still about $19,000. We'll talk about pension real quick. Pensions are awesome. They're this idea that if you work your whole life, the company, after 25, 30 years or whatever, will give you some amount of money per month for the rest of your life till you die. Usually if you die, it'll go to your spouse until they die, usually. Pensions, though, are a lot like dinosaurs in today's society because they don't exist very many places. Usually the state and the government, federal and state governments will do it. Military has a form because they're federal. But a lot of companies just don't do it anymore. And a lot of my generation and younger don't expect it. And the way the work habits have been are a lot different. That's an offline discussion. But pension plans just aren't there. So what does that mean for us? That means we have even more responsibility to save and to grow our investments and to watch that because we have no safety net coming from a company. Another thing I'll mention about pensions as to why I actually prefer no pensions in a lot of cases is I get to grow my own money. I'm responsible, okay? Not the company that I'm working for. And if the company I work for goes out of business, where does my pension go with them, okay? So it's a risk. So I actually prefer to mitigate risk, and I think I would do better than my company. I might be wrong, but I prefer to have my money in my pocket rather than my company or the government or somebody else managing it for me. And I'll tell you guys why about the government a little later today. All right, matched accounts. I know people. So what a matched account means is your company says, here, if you put $100 into your retirement account, we'll match $100. And it'll usually be up to a certain percent, okay? They are giving you free money, and all you have to do is take that money off your paycheck every month or every 2 weeks or whenever it comes in. And that's it. They will match it. What's the ROI on a matched amount of money? Anybody want to guess? What's your return on investment? If I put $100 in and they give me $100, 100%. Where else can I get 100% ROI on anything? I mean, some people, shorting GameStop did a lot better, I guess, but come on. 100% ROI. I'm going to talk about GameStop later tonight. See, I'm setting it up. So, all right. And what's the risk associated with a matched account? 0, okay? So 100% ROI, 0 risk, and I still know people that do not max their matching. Why? And this is why I actually tell you, because of that, this is one of the reasons why it's kind of a tender subject, but even if you don't have a super high emergency fund or you're just starting a Dave Ramsey type journey, I usually say to max this while you're doing everything else. The only time you don't is if you are so struggling on so many fumes and you cannot cut anything else, you're down to ramen and water every day, then I would say, okay, cut this. But usually people have more they can cut. This is the last thing you want to cut. All right, I'll put it that way for anyone who wants to criticize why I would keep doing this. But that's why. It's such a no-brainer. You got to do it. All right, that harp is done. The horse has been beaten. Okay, so rules for retirement. We always take it with us. This kind of answers the question. We want to roll it over so we don't ever touch the money. We direct transfer only. Again, that's because we cannot touch the money. Otherwise, it counts as an early withdrawal, and we cannot do that. And never pull money before age 59 and a half or 60 or whatever the rule is for the account. Okay, we never pull our money early. Dead horse. Never take a loan from your retirement account. I had a coworker that did this. He decided he was going to pull the money from his 401, and the way that it works is you actually owe interest on the money, but then you have to pay yourself the interest when you're paying it back. And if you don't pay that amount on time and in full, then you get hit with all the penalties from pulling that I was talking about earlier. So this is one of those vehicles where they're kind of dangling the carrot and tempting you just a little bit to say, hey, pull this money, go buy a car. Pull this money, go buy a house. Just loan it to yourself. And if you do that, as long as you're paying us back every month, you're good. But what happens if you pulled $100,000 out, you can't make the payment 1 month, and now you're going to get hit with $50,000 in fees? What do you do then, right? You took a okay situation, you exposed yourself to some risk, and now you're getting buried for it. And not only that, you lowered something in an account that was compounding for you. That's $10,000 a year if you pulled $100,000 out that you're losing, right? Opportunity cost, yet again. That horse will never be dead. Sorry, not sorry. So if you pull that money out, we're losing $10,000 a year by pulling it out. Okay, that's a big deal. So I don't recommend ever pulling from your retirement fund, not as a loan or early. Okay? All right, so here's how we save in order. We want to do the matched retirement account for sure, always, unless we've exhausted water and ramen and we're still not making it. That's the only time we stop this. So matched retirement first. I do that up to the max match limit. So if your company gives you 5%, do up to the 5% to get the maximum out of them, the maximum free money. After that, I typically prefer to do a Roth account. If you're a really high earner, this, again, may not be the smartest, but for 98% of you out there, this probably is the best route. Roth account next. Then we'd go up to the $6,000 limit. Then if we say, well, hey, we've got our matched account, which is maybe, let's say, $5,000 a year, and I do my Roth account, and I say, okay, well, that's $6,000 is the limit to that. I can't do a cent more than that, or I get penalized or taxed. Then I say, okay, well, I want to do more. Now we can go toward that $19,000 limit of our traditional 401. That's $25K a year. Most Americans aren't saving more than that for investment or retirement. If you are, then we can look at some other tax-favored plans like the 529s or maybe even your HSAs or some of those things, right? And then we have other investment accounts like bridge investing. So what I typically do with that is I just call it my slush fund. But that's where I play single stocks or whatever else I want to buy. So those are the orders that you'll do. So types of investment. We talk about that retirement investing. I don't want you guys to get confused who maybe aren't in this world very much, but the 401k, the Roth IRA, those are all just vehicles. We're just putting our money in that vehicle, and that's shielding us from the government or shielding us from taxes usually. But how does it get from A to B? How we invest it. And that's stocks, mutual funds, bonds, CDs, ETFs, real estate, options trading. We'll talk about crypto a little bit, annuities, or commodities, right? These are typically the bins that you can put almost every investment into, okay? I'm sure there's some out there like old cars, classic cars isn't on there, although I'd treat it kind of like a commodity. So, all right, so those are the types of investment, and we're going to talk about each one. Stocks. These are usually single companies. These are traded anytime the market's open, usually Monday through Friday. I think it's 8 to 4 Eastern, somewhere around there. So how do I buy stocks? Well, we have to get on our cell phone. There's a number on the internet for Wall Street. We dial them up and we call them, and they will ship us a piece of paper that says you just bought a stock. No, that's actually how it used to be for the older timers in here. you would actually have paper stocks. It was actually kind of a neat thing. It was like a deed, okay? We don't do that anymore. Now, there's online platforms of plentiful. So, I mean, you guys have all probably heard of Robinhood, and if you've been following the GameStop thing. But E-Trade, Ameritrade, etc. Something else I'll note here, guys. Actually, first off, anyone online, just reminder, please say hi, or if you have questions, type them, and I'll try to, ask James to get to them at some point. Apologize if we move past it, but I'll get to it by the end of the night for sure. So just type something in there so I can get attendance. And then also, I am not endorsing any specific stocks or any specific mutual funds or anything else. These are all just things that if there's something like you hear me talk about Facebook stock, I'm not telling you to go buy Facebook stock. I'm giving you examples, or I might talk about using them as an example. So I actually am not supporting or promoting any specific product or stock. Just make that clear. All right. So these are traded. So like Apple, Samsung, Amazon, IBM, those are all stocks, right? Single company stocks. Playing single stocks is not recommended without an extreme amount of personal research. For most people, we don't need to do a lot of individual stocks. And if you guys remember that list I was talking about, I actually don't play single stocks with anything in the first couple items on that list. So my 401 and my Roth, I don't play stocks with. I typically do mutual funds with those. So it's because they're lower risk. So next, we're going to get to bonds. Okay, these are typically long-term. It's a long-term holding, and then it has a maturation date, and you're guaranteed a return. Right now, they're really low, like 1.5%. That's not even really inflation. So they're not that good. Typically, they're 2 or 3%. They can get up to 6%. Again, right now, we're living in really interesting money times with the Fed and the Reserve and how they're doing qualitative easing and some of the manipulation on interest rates right now. So bonds are usually not the great way to go. But they're very safe. And they're backed by, if you believe in the U.S. government being there in 10 years, they're backed by that. Or the bank, which usually are one and the same. So certificate of deposit. So this is a CD. This kind of shows you your interest rate over your maturation over a certain amount of time. What did I do? Oh, the green was the best rates that I found. So you can see those green dots. So federal average versus green, cool. You might be able to do better. Point is, CDs are kind of similar to a bond. And a lot of times, another thing to remember about these is they usually have higher deposit limits, like $2,000, $5,000, $10,000, $25,000. And like, if you put $100,000 into a CD, they might give you 2.5%. But for the rest of us plebs down here, if we're doing $2,000, we're going to get that black line probably. So again, CDs are like a bond. Okay, mutual funds. These are typically better for long-term investing than bonds and CDs, usually because you're getting a bunch of stocks and putting them together. So I buy a little bit of Apple, a little bit of IBM, a little bit of Facebook, a little bit of Amazon, a little bit of Ford Motor Company, a little bit of Coca-Cola, and I might own a mutual fund that owns shares in all of those. So when Ford hits a new car and their new Mustang is just selling off the shelves super fast, maybe the Ford goes up 20%, but maybe IBM lost a couple ticks. Well, it all averages out, and that's the point. As a rule of thumb, mutual funds will grow 8 to 10% a year. They're usually actively managed. There's usually some kind of firm or person, financial advisor, or analyst who's actually managing the fund. And then here are some examples. We got Vanguard, American Funds, JP Morgan, et cetera. And then VT Sachs is one that one of my friends, he's a bridge investor, and he told me about them, so I just thought I'd drop VT Sachs because they averaged about 13% over the past 10 years, which is pretty good. And that's a mutual fund. So not recommending them, just stating. They've done pretty well in 10 years, in a 10-year cycle. So mutual funds also typically only buy and sell at the end of the market day rather than throughout the day. So all that volatility that happens on Wall Street when people are climbing over each other to buy and sell, mutual funds don't do that. You either buy it at the beginning, right before the market opens, or right at the end of the day after it closes. So, all right. There's 4 types of mutual funds. We got growth and income funds. Try to get through these kind of quick. Growth and income usually includes more aggressive stocks and stocks that give dividends. Dividends are really cool. The company will pay you out a percentage of what you have invested in them. An example of a dividend stock is Apple, for instance. So these are all just, again, I just threw some examples of there. If you guys want to look up what those are, you can go and you can type that ticker into Google, and you can see what their past performance is and everything else. Then we've got just growth funds. They're usually more aggressive companies, and they anticipate that they'll grow or outpace other companies. We have international funds. Why might international funds be useful? These are going to be like SK Telecom or Samsung, right? Those are foreign companies. And again, mutual funds, so you own a lot of foreign company, not just single stock. Why might those be useful? Anybody want to guess? Why do I want to own Korean stock? Well, if America doesn't do well, then Korea may still be doing okay, right? And COVID was a really interesting one because even a lot of international stocks dropped. But actually, well, I won't speak to that, but you might be able to go look and analyze how international stocks have done in the last year compared to American stocks, and you might draw some conclusions and look at how that's been playing out. Okay, so it's a diversify thing. That's why we like international funds. And aggressive growth stock is going to be usually, I almost think of these like penny stocks, but these are things usually that are extremely aggressive. Okay, something like Facebook when they were valued at $100 billion when they launched their stock, yet they'd only done $1 billion in sales the year before. Why was it so outrageous? It would have taken 100 years to reach the valuation that they had when they released. But they earned, about a 50% annualized return over the next 5 years. So whoever bought Facebook stock right away actually made out pretty well. That's aggressive growth. All right. ETFs, exchange traded funds. These are basically just mutual funds. They usually don't have an active manager, and that usually means the fees are a little lower because of that. And you can buy and sell these any time of the day. So these actually trade like a stock, and rather than the beginning and end of day. Again, we don't necessarily care, ETF mutual fund, we don't care about that day trading, right? Because we're not doing a lot of the day trade. So, real estate. People will always need housing. That's why real estate can be really good. We need housing. And that's why us buying our house and living in it, as long as we're going to be in the area long enough, makes sense financially. And that's why houses are usually considered a good investment. Okay? However, people always need housing. So having rental property can be really good. The other thing is we can really increase our margins if we have a lot of maintenance know-how. Okay, quick story with that. I had family visiting, and one of my pipes broke in the shower. Like somebody turned the handle, and it just started spraying everywhere. Now, luckily, it was filling up the tub. They come to me, and they're freaking out, and I go, oh, man, okay. Let me call a plumber, because I wasn't sure I had the tool or the part. I knew I didn't have the part. So I was like, okay, let me call a plumber. It was going to be something like $180 an hour for them to come to my house this was around midnight. So it's at midnight, okay? And I feel for the guy. I'm getting him out of bed, and he'd come to my house, but I wasn't going to pay that. So I just went, I shut off the water to my house, and I told everybody, hey, if we need to turn the water on, we will, but limited on water right now. So next morning, I went out, got the part I needed, went in, fixed it, and it cost me the cost of the part and an hour of my time. So that's an example of if you have maintenance know-how, you can save yourself a lot of money. With rental properties, that's no exception. So rental income, it's a constant stream of your return on investment. So every month, it's actually ticking money into your bank account from your initial investment. Okay? So you have to look at it that way. Assuming someone's occupying it, that's the other thing. There is risk. The risk in rental property, so we'll talk about that. The risk is that the mortgage payment is a constant stream of debt. So just like we have a constant stream of income, we have a constant stream of debt going out, plus taxes, plus maintenance, And then, or any other repairs. And what if we get a bad renter? Okay. If somebody turns your house into a drug dealing house, that's not a good thing. And it might lower the value of your house, could lower the value of the neighborhood, could definitely cost you a lot in repairs and destruction. So those are all things that can bite you on real estate. If you're going to get into real estate, I would recommend probably having a decent amount of capital on hand. You want to probably extend your emergency fund a bit more to cover those kinds of things, or even set up a little sinking fund for your investment property. Highly recommended. Okay. Options market. It's extremely risky. You basically are gambling on the stock market with this. What you do is you buy at a certain price, and I'll give an example on this later, but we're going to buy at a certain price. We get to hold it for a certain amount of time. Usually we sell it instantly, and then we hope that it falls so we can buy it back and keep the difference. You're banking on the stock price falling, and if the stock price doesn't fall, you're out a lot of money. And your income potential is the difference between zero and whatever you bought the stock at. Your income loss potential is between whatever you bought the stock price at and infinity, whatever it would grow to in the term that you own the stock. So this is why your losses are potentially infinite, but your gains are bound only by the difference between zero and the cost of the stock. So it can be fairly risky. And we'll talk about that a little at the GameStop section. All right. So that's how options work. I don't generally recommend options trading, okay? You just stay away from it unless you really get into it, really research a lot, and don't use this. If you would take the money to a casino and bet and gamble on this money, then I might play the options market. So money you're not afraid to lose, maybe, okay? So we don't want to put our life savings into options. Any questions? Yeah. Yeah, so what's your question? Is it the average Joe should avoid and rich people should do options, or no? Is that what you're asking? Oh, just making a comment. Okay. Yeah, I think to summarize the comment is that wealthy people can do a little better, or options can be in some ways safer. Is that what you're going with? Oh, okay. Yeah, so they'll use it like an insurance policy. Yeah, you can buy some options against what you... So yeah, if I own, let's say, some IBM stock, and I know that, or let's say Intel stock, sorry, and I know that AMD is coming out with a new processor that's going to double my benchmark of what the Intel processor is, so it's going to drop my market share. But I want to hold Intel long term. I might option against it in order to make some money on the back end or from that dip. Yeah, and that's an insurance because if my stock stays low, at least I made some money from the drop. Again, you're gambling though, so you got to be really careful. If it's not money you're afraid to lose, then sure, gamble away. But I won't recommend. All right, let's jump to annuities. You give a huge chunk of money to a company, and then they give you a monthly check until you die, at which point that vanishes. That sounds really familiar. Sounds like Social Security. But an annuity is more specific. Usually when you get to that retirement age, they'll come like a vulture over to your 401 and they'll say, ooh, that's a nice chunk of money. If you give me that, I'll give you this monthly. And normally their monthly amount that they give you is actually enticing. It's a little more than what your financial advisor would say that you can get per month from that money. So on the surface, it sounds like a good deal, but you have no inheritance to pass. That's the other big thing that kills you with it. So I guess if you're single with no kids and you just don't want your money to go to anybody but the annuity, okay, maybe these could be good. But for anyone who's sort of savvy at all or has a good financial planner, annuities are normally a loser for you. So typically, I do not recommend annuities. Okay? What was my last point there? Yeah, never mind. Okay. So commodities. Commodities are physical things like bales of hay, barrels of oil, physical gold. Does anybody want to guess if I would have bought physical gold 30 years ago? So, let's say 1991, I buy physical gold and I held it from then until now. What % return do you guys think I'm getting every year on that gold growth? Anybody want to guess? So in class, what's a good return on investment from stocks or something? 10% is pretty good. Gold would have given me 2.6% growth on average per year 30 years ago. Okay? I see some really disgusted faces out here and some surprised faces. It's because gold is a commodity, and what it is it's a hedge against volatility. It's a hedge against hyperinflation. Okay? And I'm going to prove that to you in the next. So if I went, okay, so I told you 30 years ago it was 2.6%. 20 years ago, it was 7.1% growth average, which is respectable. So 20 of those years, so that tells you it's kind of going up and down a little bit. But if I'd bought gold 10 years ago, I actually have lost about 0.5% per year on it, barring 2020. This was as of like January of 2020. So we'll talk about that. So it's a hedge. Typically, I recommend commodities to be about 10%. Something I'll jump back to when I was talking about mutual funds and what our approach is. Let me double check. I don't know. Anyway, it's about 25% when I was talking about aggressive growth stocks, international stock or international funds, et cetera, et cetera. A nice 25% in all four of those will just give you kind of a balanced growth. So if you absolutely don't know what to do, just put a quarter in every one of those types of funds and let it go. Commodities. All right. So we don't want to buy too much in commodities. Here's the gold prices. Really interesting, right? Okay. I was teaching this stuff, like I said, last year before COVID. And I had talked with a few people I knew that had gold. And I said, hey, we want to hold that gold. We're going to wait until it gets 18, 19, because it was around 14 to 1600, you can see in 2019. So I said, we're going to look. I said, I'm pretty sure it's going to hit 18, 19, 2000, and you can see it actually hit 2100. When it started hitting 1900, I was telling people to sell, right? Because I knew there was a lot of uncertainty. There was a lot of uncertainty with the dollar, and gold reflected that, right? So we see gold going up. Crypto. Okay, I treat crypto the way I do commodity, but with a little more volatility and risk, even more. So cryptocurrency, for people who aren't in the know, it's mined by an algorithm. It's essentially a computer program that tries to put a bunch of bits together, and if it fits just right, it'll say, cool, you have a coin, and if not, it says try again. And it follows a logarithmic curve. So there's, in theory, for you math nerds out there, the limit of a logarithmic function is infinity, but it gets there very, very, very slowly. So essentially, we have a finite resource, meaning that once you get to 10,000 Bitcoins, let's say, getting that 10,000th and first might take 5 years. So essentially, you're not ever printing new money after a certain point. That's what makes it valuable, because in a fiat system, we're able to just print more money as we choose, right? Or the Federal Reserve will print more money as they choose, okay? It's also independent of one government entity. That's why a lot of people love Bitcoin, okay? I'm not a big fan, but I'll tell you the good and the bad of what I think. It's highly secure. They use evolutionary algorithms. They're starting to apply more and more AI technology to this kind of field. And they have what's called the blockchain technology. I'll let you guys Google that. But it's basically a very secure, the cybersecurity folks love blockchain stuff. So it secures all your transactions. And it does it over multiple ledgers, basically. All right. The problem with Bitcoin, it's unregulated. So if we were in the Wild West of investing in the 1920s in the United States, people could make runs on the market. You could kind of like what we see with GameStop, sort of. But, and Bitcoin, actually. We're seeing this right now. Elon Musk comes out, says, hey, I'm going to buy a bunch of Bitcoin. Well, that sparks a lot of other people to say, oh, he's backing it, we're going to back it. And a bunch of people buy it. What happens to the price? Drives up. Now, is it artificially high, or is it going to stay that high and keep growing? Okay, this is always the question we have to ask as an investor, but it's volatile. And volatility is not our friend as long-term investors, okay? We might want to own a little bit of Bitcoin or other crypto, but we don't want to own a lot of it. Even if you missed out on a lot of money, you could lose that much money in a day too. Okay, so commodity for a portfolio. Typically my rule of thumb, guys, by the way, for commodities, about 10% of your portfolio, maybe 20. And if you're in the pawn industry or something, you get really good deals on gold and silver. You can argue with me to go up a little higher, but I still wouldn't have more than 20%. Okay. Okay, there it goes. All right, so as we get older, we want to talk about evolving our risk. Okay, when we're really young, we'll take our high school friend here. He's probably 16. He goes out, he gets a summer job. He makes $3,000, and he decides he's going to invest all $3,000 of that into stocks. He loses all of it tomorrow. Okay, it's a sad day. Kind of stinks, and that's gas money for a while. But he still has 44 years to earn and invest and do more. So if he were to risk in higher risk stuff early, his gains are probably higher too. And over the course of his next 10 years, he's probably going to come out much further ahead than behind. So if we're 20 years old, and these are just guidelines, guys, this is me being a little bit risk averse. I actually might even recommend like 100% stocks, seriously, for 20 and even 30 years old. All right, so these are all very, very conservative. We could have a good debate over why you do this, why you don't do this. Do we even need to own gold or commodities at a young age? Maybe not, but it's a hedge. So, and again, mutual funds, they're going to grow slow and steady. They're going to win the race for you. They're your turtle. So, all right. So at 30 years old, we want to shift. Notice I'm just pulling a little out of stocks, putting a little more in mutual funds. That's it. So every 10 years or so, we want to reevaluate our investment portfolio. There it goes. Okay, so at 40, we want to diversify even more. And we might even at 40 start considering something like bonds or CDs. Probably not. I don't love bonds and CDs, even in retirement. But again, these are really, really conservative, really, really safe ways to adjust your wealth gains. So by 50, we're still half in mutual, and we maybe go a little more bonds and a little more, well, that's really about it. By 60, we're still going to have some mutual funds kicking in for us. I notice I put liquidity up here. Liquidity is really important too. We're not really gaining money on liquidity, but it's there as a buffer for our medical bills, for extra costs, maybe for our vacations and doing things for our family. It's not really an investment at that point, but you get what I mean. This is the total of our portfolio. So we might actually start, and when we're 70, having a decent amount of liquid on hand is okay. Okay. So other tax favorable accounts, we've got the ESAs, the 529s, health savings account, flexible spending account, and guidelines. The guideline for this, guys, I'm not going to go through all these because time is a little bit iffy. They all have pros and cons. ESA and 529 are for college savings. It's kind of a tax-free way to save for your kids' college. Can be really, again, favorable for you to do that if you're going to save. One thing I will say, and I might get stoned on the stage for this, do not harm yourself for your kids financially, okay? That may not be the most popular thing, and you guys may not agree with me, but hear me out. If I pull a lot of my money from what I was going to grow and compound right now, and I do all that for my kid, and to get them a certain college fund or to really bolster their college fund so they can go to Harvard or something. Well, great, but I'm losing all that compounding from now till when I retire. Not only that, but if I keep compounding and growing and being smart about what I'm doing, later on I can inherit my kid a bunch of money. Okay, I can buy them a new house. I can do all kinds of stuff with them at retirement age that I might not have been able to do. So what's better now? Or what's better? College right now or $2 million later, okay, for your kid. And so maybe, right? But personally, and this is a different thing, but I grew up, didn't have a lot of college help, and figured it out, okay? We all have to figure out when we get to be adults. We all have to figure it out for ourselves anyway. Having that help is great. It's a blessing, but do not do it at your own detriment is my advice, okay? Just remember, too, when we do these tax favorable accounts, guys, this is like getting a gift card to Target. It's not always, we're changing the color of money, and we limit then what we can spend that money on. And so if we don't use it, we end up losing it. And the other thing is passing on HSAs and some of these other things to kids and grandkids do get taxed as income. Most of them do. So we end up losing quite a bit on that, even though it's tax favorable now. So if we don't spend that money, we tend to lose it. We tend to lose a lot of it. So just keep that in mind. It does transfer, so it's not the worst thing ever, but just approach it with a reasonable, your family situation in mind, with kind of figure out what you need. We don't want a lot of extra in those accounts. Expelliarmus. Leviosa? Hey, that one worked. Harry Potter fans? All right. I probably can't do Harry Potter stuff in church. All right. So, retirement. So we talked about the 4% rule. This is actually really, really cool. Anybody who's talked to me for 10 minutes about finance has heard me mention the 4% rule. Okay, these things are really good. What this is it says, there's a theory out there that says if you plan for retirement, whatever your total amount is in your account, let's say you got $1 million, 4% per year, if you take 4% per year from that account as growth, you will never touch a penny of that $1 million, okay? So I'll just have that $1 million sitting there working for me, and I'm just skimming 4%. Now, the logic for that comes with we get 4% per year and we assume 3% inflation, and our retirement account should be earning about 7%. So the math kind of lines up. This has been proven really, really well over the last, I'll say 60 years, 50 or 60 years, okay? Probably further, but it's a pretty good rule of thumb. So now we combine this with other forms of income, like maybe our Social Security, maybe a pension, maybe even part-time work or something else. And also we have something called Bernice's, Bernice's Reality Retirement Plan. I'll talk about Bernice's real quick. It's just a theory that says that you spend less the older you get. So after you retire, your bills are usually way less. And it kind of makes sense on paper. You probably have your house paid off if you're doing things right. When you retire, your house is probably paid off. And then furthermore, outside of medical, your other bills are probably covered. The one thing I'll mention there, jump back to insurance. If we have to go to a nursing home, or we need hospice, or we need things like that, that's where our costs can kill us in older age, so we want to have that covered. So keep that in mind too. So that's the one thing that violates Bernice's rule is healthcare coverage. So make sure you're planning for your healthcare. So there's another thing here that, I just talk about this. $2 million is your goal normally. Most Americans go for 2 to 10 million is what our goal should be. Most working Americans can usually achieve in that range if they are using this 15% rule I'm talking about. The cool thing is that, again, about that 4% is we're skimming and we never run out of that $1 million. And then we can also shift to what's called a slow burn, where we're going to start pulling maybe either an additional 4% or something, and then that should, in theory, last us about 20 years. But we get a diminish on what we're earning and generating every year, so it kind of falls off. I don't normally recommend doing that, especially if you want to leave inheritance. So what we want to do is we want 25 times or 30 times, if we want to be really consistent, of what our annual salary saved. Okay, so if your annual salary is $100K a year, you want $2 million in an account, minimum. And if you do that with the 4% rule, that's $80K a year coming into you. And if you did it as Roth, that's $80K a year coming into you, tax-free. Okay. So, 65 years. See, I was close, I'm guessing. I didn't look at the slide. Bridge investing. I talked about this a little bit in one of the other sessions. This is when you're really, really young and you want to save money and retire early, let's say 40 or 45. What we do there is we take that 15% rule and we probably put it to a 30% rule. No joke. You got to save every single dime you can. And you do that for as long as you can. I just want to point out, opportunity cost. Maybe you retire at 45. That's still 15 years where you're not earning your salary, which an average 45-year-old might even be, I don't know, median income, 63. That might be a reasonable income. So you're missing out on 630 plus half of that, so 315. So $945,000 is what you're giving up by retiring early, just in income, not counting the compounding and the other things that you'd be doing. So just keep that in mind too for you bridge investors out there. It's okay. There's a way to do it, and you got to hustle and budget to do it, but just know what you're giving up when you do it. And obviously, we can't invest 100% into retirement accounts. My superhero name's Captain Obvious. All right. So I've got some investment resources up here. These are just some of them: Tastyworks, E-Trade, Betterment, Wealthfront, Schwab, Fidelity. Those are all ones. I mentioned for my Roth IRA, I use a robo-trading account. Wealthfront and Betterment are both similar. They robo-trade for you. I'm not sure that they do as well as I'd like them to, but they do okay. They're not the best, not the worst. So find the one that's right for you. Look at what you want to do. If you just want to buy like a bunch of mutual funds, you can do that on like E-Trade or Ameritrade or some of those. If you don't want a robot to manage it for you or a person to manage it for you. A person to manage it will be like Schwab or Fidelity probably. So, all right. So let's run some numbers for Social Security. This is a really good one, guys. That's kind of why I rushed through. I wanted to get to some of these examples. So here's how Social Security works. They take money from you every paycheck. And your employer normally has to pay 50% of that too. So if you're self-employed, you pay a lot more than everybody else. At age 60, you can choose to start withdrawing. However, older than age 60, you get more. So the longer you delay, the more money per month you'll get. And that's, again, the government's playing an actuarial game, gambling on when you're going to die and how long you're going to live. So they go off of averages. And I think, what did I say? The average male lives to be, 72 or 74, and the average female is like 79. So they want you to start taking Social Security at age 70. So they're going to incentivize you to do that so that they don't have to pay as much. All right. So this is the exchange rate the government's giving us, okay? We have to pay, let's see. Oh, I didn't put them on the next one. So let's say you make $100,000 a year. That's about $1,200 a month between you and your employer. You might only pay $600, but your employer's still paying it. I had someone criticize me on this, and I'm like, well, you're only paying $600 a month. So I took the numbers, and I was a smart aleck, and I ran the $600 a month too. But frankly, this is the money the government gets on my behalf. So my employer could give me this money instead, and I would grow it better than the government. That would be my counter argument. Anyway, monthly payouts about $3,000 a month at age 60 for someone making that amount. So if you do $1,200 a month over 40 years at 8%, you'll get $3.7 million. At 30 years, you'll get $3.2 million. That doesn't seem right. I have to question my math. I know it's around 3.2 million for 30 years, though. It should be a lot higher at 40, or it should be quite a bit lower. But either way, it'll be either 2 million at 30 years, or it would be like 6 million at 40 at the same interest rate because of doubling time. I didn't teach you guys that equation, but it's essentially 70 divided by your interest rates, roughly your doubling time. So 7% interest rate's about 10 years to double your money. All right, so 4% rule would mean on the 3.2 million, we're earning about $10.6 thousand per month. And remember, that money's not going down. That 3.2 million stays intact. So we never touch a dime, intact. We never touch a dime of it. We're only living off of what it's generating in the stocks and mutual funds. So that means that when I die, I get almost $11,000 for me and my spouse until we die. And then when they die, if we have kids, I can just give the 3.2 million to my kids. Okay? That's the exchange rate the government's getting us. So instead what the government's doing is they're giving us $3,000 a month until we die and then nothing more. That's the opportunity cost. That's the exchange rate. See, now you guys see why I'm not a huge fan of A, the Social Security program, and B, other people managing my money. Okay? This illustrates it really well. All right, so we're going to look at GameStop, the nefarious GameStop. It's basically short selling. This is a phenomenon that started about, 2 months back? I have it on my graph. Basically, there was a bunch of group on Reddit who got together and they said, hey, there's a big hedge fund that's overextending. And on shorting the GameStop shop, I'm going to mess myself up a lot. GameStop stock, okay? So GME stock is going to get shorted, and these guys overextended. If enough people get together, we can run the price up. We can make a run on GameStop, and we can get the price going really high, and all those people who are short selling it lose a ton of money. So remember, I said they can lose an infinite amount of money. The higher that stock price goes, the more they lose. So, is there anybody in here that thinks GameStop is a really good company that's going to just be here doing really well in 10 years? Okay, so that's the point. That's the point I want to make. This is why, people talk about the hedge fund being greedy and things like that. I won't get into that politic too much, but it wasn't even that. Any of us as investors would buy GameStop if we thought it would lose. If we were going to short stock, this isn't an awful one to pick. So anyway, I guarantee most of us weren't rushing to buy GameStop and add it to our portfolio a year ago, okay? Because we didn't think the company had a good business model. They didn't pivot well. They don't offer any good or service that isn't done better online. And anyone who's gone in, it's worse than Pawn Stars for what they offer you for things. Like they'll give you $10 for your PlayStation 5. All right, so another thing to remember, short-term trading is generally a zero-sum game, meaning there are winners, there are losers, okay? The way that it worked basically is, let's say I want to buy a stock for $10. I'll pay Dalton a fee. Maybe I give him $11. Maybe I give him $11 for his stock, and I say, will you loan me your stock for 2 weeks? 2 weeks is the call. And I'll give you all your stock back in full in 2 weeks. I'll pay you a small fee to do that. And what I do is I go and I sell it instantly. And then if the stock drops to $7, I buy it back. And then I pocket the $3 and I give it back to Dalton. Okay? Or in that case, I guess I'd pocket $2 if I count his fee, right? So that's the way shorting works. So these guys got caught, basically, and there was a huge run on the market. And if you look January 19th, it was about $40 a share. We went up to about $3.50 a share. There was some scandal with Robinhood that froze all the trading. So I won't go into all that. I'll let you guys decide how much scandal that is. But Robinhood was controlling over 50% of all the trades of GameStop. All 50%. So you instantly told people you cannot buy or sell on our platform for half of all the company's shares for about a day, okay? So they froze it. Well, what does that do to the price? All right, we talk about runs on the market. If you freeze, that causes a lot of panic, And people were able to sell but not buy, by the way. So a lot of people sold. That had to do too with a little bit on how Robinhood does. How, you have to have capital on hand for the transactions. Like they actually are paying you out of their pocket when you make a transaction with them. And then it's delayed, but then later on they carry out the transaction. And with something this volatile and with that many trades per second and things going on, they got overextended too. Because this is a lot of money per share, right? For a stock that should have been $20 a share and traded normally, it now becomes a super stock at $3.50 a share, trading 100 times per second as any other stock on the market. So defending Robinhood a little bit, there's a reason they froze, but it, of course, drove the price down. So anybody who shorted the stock at $3.50, what do you think happened? Especially if they knew that it was going to freeze, they knew it would drop. So that's a guarantee, $200, $150 a share overnight if you shorted the stock. Guaranteed right there. That's crazy. So another one is, I sent this to, no, I didn't. I put it in. Cool. So it dropped back down to $40 like we'd expect, right? And it's actually been rebounding. People are rallying it back. My point with GameStop, guys, as investors, is this kind of, I wanted to go in a little more, but I'm going to wrap up on that one, is that it's an artificial effect, right? This was brought on by people rushing to something, trying to make a quick dollar, and it was extremely volatile and extremely risky, okay? This is not, again, going back, this is not how we, frankly, as Christians or as if we're trying to do long-term investing, this isn't what we want to be doing. If you have a slush fund and you want to play some of this, great. But again, that's money that you can afford to lose or that you're willing to be very high risk. You have to understand this kind of stuff is very high risk. All right. And Bitcoin has a similar, with how it can be run on. It's kind of similar. All right. Did it go? Was that it? All right. So next time we're going to talk about paying off our home early. We're going to talk about house shopping, home buying traps, disasters that can happen, I guess, and winning in real estate. And we'll talk about finally financial peace and kind of what's at the end of the road. Hey, it takes a dance. Okay, so your homework tonight is list your current active retirement plans. So I want you guys thinking about what your retirement plans are. If you're young, I want you to really ponder starting your first job and no matter what, trying to set your budget up to where you have A, no debts when you start out, and B, 15% put into your investment account from paycheck number 1, maybe paycheck number 3 because you got to get on your feet. But seriously, if you start, anybody in here started 15% in their budget towards investing the day that they start working until the day they retire at 60-ish, they're good. Okay. You'll be so well off. You don't even know. All right. Active retirement plans. What are you on track to have? Try to estimate based on the doubling time and some investment calculators maybe with how much you're putting away. Look at some scenarios. Maybe see what you're on track to actually have and see if that's in line with where you want to be or not. And if it's not, then think about maybe what else you can do. If you're a lot older, there's some hard truths there. There are some things we can do. I'm working with a guy who is over 60 right now, and, we're working, but he's not going to end up with $3 million. And then what do you want to have when you retire, basically? That's the homework. So figure that out. Question? Okay. What about homemakers? What's your question? So if you're not working outside the home, how do you plan for retirement? Well, hopefully your significant other is working. And if your significant other is working, then you guys as a team are still figuring out how you're planning for retirement. That's all I can say. I mean, other than that, if you're a homemaker, you have to try to find ways to income streams to help with that if you want to plan for that more. But yeah, if you don't have an income, it's difficult to budget for retirement. So let's see. I think that's it. Okay. All right, other questions? Oh. I saw it come up in green. Okay, so I had a question online. Would it be feasible for someone in their 60s to start an investment portfolio? I guess I saw that and subconsciously just rattled about it. But yes, you can. The way that you want to do it is very sensitive, I'll say. You have to be very, very careful, because when you're 60 plus, you're risk adverse as well. So that really comes down to, what are your goals? Are you trying to leave a lot of money for your kids? Are you trying to just earn extra so you can maybe travel more or even pay off a house or something? What's your medical and Social Security and other things? What are those looking like? As with a lot of things when we're talking about retirement investing, we're trying to think about, what do we want? What do we want our quality of life to be? What does our standard of living need to be? What are our goals? And our goals do change. That's why I say we reassess every 10 years. But once we're 60 plus, we're in that period where we should be pulling from our lifetime of hard work. So it can be difficult and it can be touchy. So the answer is yes, you can invest, but the risk that you're going to expose yourself to is highly dependent on your goals. Other questions? Okay. That being said, I'll give you the quick example of the guy who I worked with recently was 60. He owns he's a business owner. His business is probably worth a couple $100,000. He has a house. He's essentially working on putting as much as he can into, he actually is using a Roth. There's a weird rule with that you can put into a Roth, but you can't touch it for 5 years. So year 1, he can't touch for 5 years. And then when he deposits year 2, he can't touch that for 5 years after that. And so it isn't setting him up per se, but he'll have more to leave to his kids tax-free. And it was kind of weird. The numbers ended up working out for that to be okay for him. Other than that, he's just putting as much money as he can into his home and his business, and a little bit into other ventures, higher risk ventures, but not really. His main goal is to leave assets for his children and to try to have those assets as debt-free as possible. So with that goal in mind, that's kind of what he's working toward. So, all right. Well, thanks for coming, guys. Last week will be the last week. And for everyone online, I'll have a handout or a review that I want everyone to fill out, because it helps us out with making the course better and everything. But I'll ship that out next week, and I should see y'all next week. Thank you, guys.